did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu. And I'm that spitter, baby, they don't want you to see, but everybody south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and plan to getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. Me, I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah,
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
X-ray season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my own flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on to the hearse. Party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete. I'm a verbal athlete, deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building. My whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
Happy Monday, everybody. As Dre said there, let's get into it. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I'm your co-host, Trey Holiday. And as always, joining me in the studio is my co-host, my guy, Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday.
Hey, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Right back at you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You got it popping in the pink.
Hey, popping in the pink today. That's what's up. You know, got to bring the colors.
All right. This is a good opportunity right now, as usual, to one, welcome you to the Morning Update Show, and two, tell you this is the perfect opportunity to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share this stream with people who you feel could benefit from culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the Emerald City. Today, we got a few headlines. We're going to move through them quickly, although we're going to continue to talk about these things. But we've got King County Executive Dow Constantine is going to be joining us, so we want to leave some time for the county executive. We'll be talking about a few different things: COVID relief, talking about some economic drivers, also talk about something that's near and dear to us, and we're going to talk about here in this first clip is gun violence that's occurring not only here in the city of Seattle but across King County.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready to get into it with Dow. I think it's so important for the audience to understand some of the measures that are taking place at the executive level. So I'm glad he's joining us today.
Yeah, good stuff. We'll get right into it here. This first clip is actually from King 5, and I mean, impacted. We right there on 23rd and Jackson, in the heart of the Central District, yesterday about 3:30 p.m. 4 people shot. I mean, so many bullets that was up there. I talked to people. it was a crazy scene. Here's a clip right here from King 5.
Well, this evening, we know that 2-year-old girl is in Harborview. She remains in critical condition. 3 other adult men also injured in that shooting. Meanwhile, police still trying to figure out who the shooter may have been.
We just heard like at least 12 gunshots just popping off.
Shell casings litter this AutoZone parking lot.
It was a lot of gunshots. It was a lot.
Gunshots that police say wounded 4 people, 3 adult men and a 2-year-old child. Multiple 911 calls came in around 3:20 Sunday afternoon.
Before any of Seattle Fire or an ambulance or even police arrived, the victims either transported themselves or were transported by other civilians to the hospital.
Seattle police homicide detectives along crime scene investigators combing a scene that stretched across the parking lot. Police believe there may be multiple suspects and say the shooter walked up to the AutoZone on foot and opened fire. We don't know why or if the shooter and suspects knew each other.
I can't imagine being the parent of that child right now.
With so many unanswered questions, what we do know is that a 2-year-old child is in the hospital fighting for life.
That girl remains in critical condition as we head late into this evening. Police not releasing a lot of information about a potential suspect. They are asking anyone with any possible information to contact the Seattle Police Department. In Seattle, Sebastian Robertson, King 5 News.
Trey Holiday.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Oh, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, I was getting calls yesterday, understanding again that when gun violence happens, particularly in our community, man, we are a stone's throw away from knowing the victims, knowing the families, going through it because they're either friends or colleagues or neighbors that we grew up with, people that we know. And, I'm always giving the message to send the love to the families, particularly as that young 2-year-old is in the hospital right now fighting for her life. And so, you know what? Oh, this is just, it's an all around tragedy. We've been talking about the rise of gun violence and how it really affects our people. And this right here is just, it's disheartening to say the least. There's so much more I could say about this and, keeping my composure here because as you said, we know some of these people, this is tough. Oh.
Yeah, and once again, when we talk about this, there's the victims, and right now, 3 adults, small child. There's also, look how many giveaways we've done there, even throughout COVID. How many different events we did right there in that same parking lot. Whether it was food during Christmas, we teamed up with Willard Jimerson. And NZYD, we did a Christmas giveaway up there for people to get Christmas gifts for their kids. That's the Starbucks that my mama goes to. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Just it's right there on 23rd and Jackson. And this is an issue of gun violence in our community that we've been dealing with generationally now. We talk about when I was at Garfield High School, dealing with the same thing. And this is something that's persisted in our community for decades. And we see here that, the impact is real. I was doing a live show yesterday, right? And I got that news. And the show still went off cool, but it just took all the wind out of my sails when we hear about these things. And it's continuous. You see, it was just a few weeks ago, community passageways. A few weeks before that, there was another shooting. And we're just talking about the municipality, even beyond the city of Seattle. When you talk about these other 39 jurisdictions or municipalities in the county, a lot of them in South King County, this gun violence is impacting people, impacting the victims definitely and their families, but whole communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a wide range of messages that are then not only just dispensed between other community members, those who have lost loved ones, lost children, really, having that plea to the community to say, look, let's stop this. Let's stop, going after each other with the, gun violence, because so often, man, it's a lot of people that were not unintentionally harmed. That 2-year-old did nothing to no one, right? And so being there with her father and in experiencing this now, it's like, come on, man, we got to do better. And you're absolutely right. We've done tons of events there. And here we are now realizing that, this was utilized as a place to take out anger or utilize guns. It's just one of those things, man. This is going to be tough. And I know we're going to have so much more to follow up on it.
It is. And we had a few more headlines, to be honest with you. I think we're going to skip over those so we can jump right into our conversation with King County Executive Constantine. Real important issues. Of course, like I say, talking about is COVID relief. But man, this is something that we really need to touch on as it impacts our community. I know I've got a handcrafted motion graphic back there somewhere, right? Ah, voila. Hey, I spent a lot of time making this. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we have King County Executive Dow Constantine. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury. Before we bring in County Executive Constantine, got a clip right here from last month where he announced this massive $600 million relief package.
Of the $1.9 trillion federal package, King County will receive $437 million in flexible funds. Today, I announce my plan for the largest emergency supplemental budget in county history. This $600 million package includes those Rescue Act dollars and also FEMA reimbursement funds and resources from the county general fund.
All right. Oh, yeah. DeSandro. Please bring in King County Executive Dow Constantine.
Hey, Amari. How are you this morning?
Hi,
Hi, Trey.
How are you, Executive Con? Welcome back to the Morning Update Show. Last time you were here was 9 months ago in July, so welcome back.
So, I mean, two things. One, both the clip you just showed and my current picture show that I definitely need to get my shots and go get a haircut. And second, you managed somehow to find a still of me from that placard you put up where I'm wearing the exact same cheap zip-up jacket, which means I've got to get out of the house and do some shopping.
You know, you an executive, you can't wear the same things every day, man.
I mean, it's all worn out after a year of this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know, that news yesterday of the shooting, you know, we kind of almost become numb to these shootings. They seem to be almost daily, but you know, a little 2-year-old baby girl gets shot, and it's impossible to reconcile in your head. I was carrying that around with me yesterday, and I don't know how to react rationally to that, right? You know, we're trying to do the right things. We're trying to treat gun violence as a public health crisis. We're trying to invest to reduce the amount of violence that's happening, but it just filled me with such anger and outrage and frustration, and I don't really know how to be about it. I don't know really how to channel that, and I'm sure other people are feeling the same way. But you know, I'm happy to be here today to talk about our broader work seeking to reduce gun violence in our community.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And and you're right, broader society does become numb to these types of things, but believe me, in our community, it's still very raw in there. I will do this as Advocate Constantine, because we have a section here where we really want to dive into gun violence, and so we'll circle back around. If that's okay with you, I want if you could tell us about this $600 million COVID relief package, and specifically, we talked to the whole county, but man, we're a Black network. So specifically, if you could tell us how this COVID package is going to benefit Black people in King County.
Yeah. So it's a $600 million emergency budget that we sent over. So this is a lot of COVID funding to get us through the vaccines and keeping people healthy until this is over. That's about 40% of it. A third goes to support people to get them through, like rental assistance, for example, and taking on homelessness. And then about 22% is aimed at what's being called nationally building back better, creating jobs for people who struggled during the crisis, as well as people struggled before, making the economy more equitable, more accessible to more people than it was before the crisis. So specifically, in answer to your question, I designated $5 million to our Office of Equity and Social Justice to support community-driven strategies aimed at reducing hate and bias and racially motivated violence. And that is with community-based organizations reaching out, identifying hate crimes, cataloging them, communicating through ethnic media. $40 million to create jobs for those who've been pushed out of work or had been out of work, especially those who've been homeless, to expand our conservation corps. So hundreds of jobs for people working for the county, working in parks and roads and or urban unincorporated communities, and getting back on their feet financially. And then $25 million for a business and economic resiliency fund focused specifically on Black, Indigenous, and people of color-owned businesses. And all of that money will be allocated using a community-led process to get it where it needs to go to help businesses that have been really the most impacted by the COVID crisis get back on their feet, survive this, and thrive. There's a lot of investment here, and it's, I think, all aimed at our goal of remaking this community in a way that has less income disparity, less race-based disparities, greater opportunity for everyone, and really getting people through this time of crisis.
Well, it's good to hear some of the details about that. And my question to you is, we see oftentimes when money is put towards these wide-ranging solutions and we want to really empower community groups, what is being done to try to mitigate some of it is a competition-based thing, but how are you ensuring that there is less damage being done? We've seen it happen in the past, and I'm wondering how we're learning from past mistakes or mishaps with regard to that level of competition that really then leaves certain folks out, does not allow the smaller orgs to get that voice that's needed. What is being done to try to ensure that is a bit mitigated in this process?
Yeah. And we've seen that, and it is a constant process of learning lessons and adjusting to avoid the unintended consequences in the future. And so we will have community-based organizations, and not just large ones, and community leaders joining together to help identify how these funds can be best directed to help not just the biggest and the most established either businesses or community-based organizations, but organizations that are small, that are new, that are representing the most marginalized in our communities, including new immigrant groups. And we'll be providing funds to leverage private capital, which could mean matching funds or could mean loan guarantees, for example, providing things like business coaches, mentoring, training, professional development, providing opportunities to increase community ownership opportunities so that everyone has a stake in the rise and prosperity that happens in our communities, and really not just ideas that have already been tried, but listening to the community's ideas about other ways to help generate wealth, to build wealth in the Black community. I think it's an exciting opportunity. It is we do not pretend to have the answers. We're asking the questions, but we're trying to put the funding where it can do the most good in this moment of opportunity. I mean, crisis presents opportunity, this moment of opportunity to help people to a better life economically.
All right. And speaking of economics and the county, and we see that a lot of Black people have been pushed out in the South King County, and a lot of people altogether, especially people who want to buy homes. You can't afford to buy a home here in the city of Seattle. What kind of programs, whether it was in this COVID relief or pre-existing, or maybe it doesn't exist, but you can tell us, what kind of programs does the county have for people who are, I mean, they're locked out of home ownership here in the city of Seattle, and now it's become very competitive out there in the county, especially for our Black families or families of color that are trying to get home ownership. We know that home ownership has been in a decline in the Black community here. Home ownership is key to generational wealth. What programs are out there for families looking for home ownership in South King County?
Well, the county, first of all, you're absolutely right that the way most families manage to become more and more economically secure over the generations is through increase in property values, getting a stake and being able to benefit from the change in the housing market. And Black families in particular, because of redlining, because of discrimination in lending, and because of just the discrimination in the economy, have had more trouble being able to get equity. And so we have had several pilots, places where the county has put funds to help with, for example, down payment assistance to try to overcome the upfront barriers. I worked in a nonprofit organization as a board member of the Delridge Neighborhoods Development Association, where we actually created new housing in Delridge with down payment assistance to help people into that first home where they could build wealth. But I think it's going to be a combination of those private and public efforts. And I think that the funding I just talked about, the $25 million, that can definitely be one of the ideas to build wealth in the community, is helping people get over that initial barrier. They might be able to make the monthly payments, but they can't come up with a down payment. Get over that initial barrier so that instead of paying rent to a landlord, they can be putting money into an asset that is going to give them a secure retirement.
All right. I wanted to play a clip here. You made the news the other day. The county made $1.5 million investment into a sound stage over on Harbor Island. So we'll go ahead and play that real quick.
Also this morning, calls are growing.
Behind those orange cranes, inside a mostly unused warehouse, King County investing in a plan to lure Hollywood to Seattle.
You know, we don't want to have to watch any more films about Seattle when we recognize the streets on screen being Vancouver or Portland or, heaven forbid, Atlanta.
Saturday, a look at the new Harbor Island Studios, a $1.5 million county project to renovate what was once the Fisher Flour Mill into a state-of-the-art 117,000 square foot soundstage.
On making sure that we are teaming with the state and with the 39 cities in our jurisdiction to provide the economic conditions filmmakers need to come put people back to work here.
A plan they say will produce hundreds of family wage union jobs. A plan they say is already working, with a major production set to start shooting next week.
All right. So my question, one, this is good. Clearly we're in video and production, soundstage, everything else. This is a good thing that's happening here. But my question to you is this, is that government has always invested in infrastructure, and then Black people get locked out of the infrastructure. It's tax dollars that build the port. Black people have been locked out the port for years. So how intentional is the county going to be? Spend $1.5 million there and everything else. I think most people think it's a great idea. But man, Black filmmakers, Black grips, Black directors, Black producers, Black lighting specialists, man, they're the last people to ever get any work. Now you've made an investment here. You're inviting Hollywood here. How intentional is your office going to be to make sure that Black people are actually out there working on Harbor Island?
I mean, that is a great question. And I'm glad that you asked it, because in our initial announcement over a year ago that we were going to open up all county properties to filming, reduce permit fees, make it easier for people to make films and television here, or episodic productions here. We included incentives for green film production, and we included incentives for the hiring of professionals in the industry from historically marginalized communities, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other racially excluded from the film industry communities. And this has been a real challenge all across the country, but we have a chance here to set a different standard, and we're going to do it. I do know there are a lot of Black filmmakers here who would love the opportunity to shoot close to home rather than going to the expense of traveling elsewhere where they have the facilities. This is a chance for us to put our money where our values are. And our values are in empowering everyone, and especially those who've been marginalized, to be able to make money, make art, learn a craft, and do better than we've done before. And so, yeah, that is exactly the correct question to be asking. And we set that out as a core principle right from the get-go.
I think that that's a great way to do this. And my question kind of really piggybacks off of that, because I want to do a comparison, right? We saw that we said, look, we're going to invest in tech jobs here in the city of Seattle. Seattle is going to be a tech city, right? And that really benefited the rest of King County. And unfortunately, what we also saw was that it was a real influx of transplants coming to the city to get those jobs. There weren't actual pathways for kids graduating from Garfield, graduating from Franklin, Rainier Beach, to be a part of that whole dynamic around tech jobs. So my question is there any intentionality to ensure that it is like local filmmakers, and that it's not just like, now this is another destination for all of you all over the country? Not that it shouldn't be in some parts, but how do we ensure that folks that are local here, that grew up here, that maybe have always wanted an opportunity to explore their creative side? I think, like Omari said, like, we're doing it here on our own, but how intentional is there going to be some real pathways to saying, look, we want to make sure that the creative young folks that we have here, the creative people that we have here, are the ones really benefiting? Is there any regard, or did you guys take any measures around that?
Yeah, so as I said, from the beginning, we created incentives for filmmakers to hire locally and to hire from communities of color. But more than that, we have a film advisory group of local filmmakers that we've pulled together, and it is open to membership from film professionals across our region to really identify how we can build the local productions here, build the local film industry. And that includes Black filmmakers and Black professionals in filmmaking who have had to travel all across the country to get work. We know we have lots of stories of people traveling on a weekly basis or having to go to some other region for 6 months to do a production because the films that should be made here are not being made here. So the answer to your question is yes, we're being purposeful about having an inclusive film industry and a local film industry. We've gotten a lot of inquiries already from local filmmakers about when this soundstage might be available for their productions. And we're going to keep working to get better and better at making sure that the county investments, that the public investments, are lifting up those who've been left behind before.
Right. I think that it's real important. Like these days, I mean, for decades, government really got away with taking public money, building infrastructure, and excluding Black people. And I mean, man, those days are over with. We're going to take a quick break real quick here. Executive Constantine actually got PSA from Public Health. King County, when we come back, we want to talk to you about gun violence disruption in King County. We're watching the Morning Update Show.
Public Health, Seattle, King County, Zero Youth Detention, along with our partners from across the South King County region, are committed to reducing violence and creating the conditions needed for our neighborhoods to be safe and free of crime. Too often, the response to crime and violence has been a piecemeal approach with a program here and a program there. When family units collapse, schools fail to educate, the economy fails to produce jobs, and crime rises, we've looked to law enforcement and punitive measures to save us. Nothing could be more wrong or further from the truth. Law enforcement can't shoulder all the burden or take the rest of us off the hook. We are acknowledging the lived experiences of Black, brown, and indigenous communities, We are centering community as the experts who can effectively identify key issues related to systems, policies, and practices that impact children, families, and communities of color across this region. Those most impacted by the issues will help call out and identify the root causes, including structural and systemic factors. 150 residents will partner with King County to develop strategies, solutions, and an action plan that explicitly addresses system changes needed and eliminates barriers to access for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. These residents will also identify the criteria used to measure our collective success. Simply put, we need your help as we do the work needed to make King County the safest in this country. It will take specific commitments from all of us, community members, our young people, elders, and leaders from the sectors all across this region. Together, we will get this work done. Please click the link below and sign up for a work group. Or you can recommend a co-facilitator from community for each work group. We look forward to hearing your ideas, concerns, feedback, and solutions as we build a community where all our children can be happy, healthy, hopeful, safe, and thriving.
All right, welcome back. We're joined by King County Executive Dow Constantine. Sir, when we started the show, when we started this interview here, you talked about how you were impacted hearing the news of yesterday's shooting there on 23rd and Jackson, a 2-year-old shot in the head in critical condition. I mean, what is the county's commitment? We've been talking about ZYD and public health. They've been on here quite a few times. What's the county's commitment around this gun violence that's occurring not only here in our municipality in the city of Seattle, but across King County and especially South King County?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to thank Derek Wheeler-Smith. He is my leader, our leader for the Zero Youth Detention work at King County, and he's really taken on the challenge of gun violence as sort of core to that mission. And what he's talking about there is the creation of the Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan to tackle the gun violence epidemic, what we were talking about there. It is a really major shift in approach away from a sort of command and control law enforcement approach to a public health approach to the gun violence epidemic. And I put $600,000 into my biennial budget that was approved at the end of last year for the development of this plan. It is, I think, going to really change the way things work nationally, and I think it is going to create better outcomes in our community. And it is going to require a lot of people, he said 150 people, to help create a plan that is genuinely informed by the experience of Black and other communities. I've asked all the mayors in King County, all 39 of them, to sign on to a pledge to commit to work together on these solutions. Really need government leaders to work collaboratively across jurisdictions because the violence does not limit itself to one jurisdiction or another. And these strategies need to be both community-based and long-term. But we got some sort of go-first strategies, or a go-first strategy, and to fight gun violence that's happening now. High-intensity engagement and support for youth and families that are identified as being at high risk for gun violence. It's a very small group that falls into this kind of category when you view it from a public health perspective, people who are likely to be victimized by or to victimize people with gun violence, identified by hospitals or by community-based referrals or even by the prosecutor's office. And we're partnering with community-based organizations to do this work. So you mentioned Community Passageways, Choose 180, Black Women Coalition, all partners in figuring out how to really get to those who are the most at risk and begin providing the intensive intervention, the treatment and recovery, the counseling, help for younger siblings who might be at risk, and then restoration after a shooting event for the families and for the community to begin to heal. And there's a lot more than that, but the PSA was about recruiting people to help on the work groups for this regional community safety and well-being plan. And I'm glad you played the PSA, because that was going to be one of my main asks for people to sign up to help out.
Right. And Executive Constantine, you mentioned 600,000 and that you're putting in your budget for that. Is that enough? And I only bring that up because when you factor in the cost just around one homicide, but now you're talking about this epidemic that's hitting our county. And you talk about, of course, there's the victims, there's the law enforcement, there's the courts, there's the jails, there's the impact on the direct community, there's an impact on indirect community, there's an impact on property values. So in countering gun violence, do you feel that your office or the county or the council is committing enough resources to actually tackle this?
Well, I need to tell you about the rest of the resources. So the 600,000 was to begin the creation of the plan. We have now 900,000 of the federal CARES Act money with the leadership of Councilmember Zahalai over on the legislative side that we put in to implement that Go First strategy that I just talked about. And then $2 million additional dollars of a violence prevention grant program. So this is for grassroots efforts that promote community safety and reduce violence, especially among young people. So not government programs, but programs of and by the people. And that was another initiative that Councilmember Zahalai sponsored on the council side. I put in an additional $1 million to help create economic opportunities for youth and young adults who are or have been involved in gun violence, to create pathways that disrupt the cycle of violence. So, jobs for people to be able to make a better life economically for themselves. And all of these, are learning. We're constantly learning what works based on a public health approach and working to reduce the amount of violence happening in the community.
Well,
so that's a total of about almost $5 million.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously a really great investment, and the investment is totally needed, and glad that you guys have kind of pointed out some of the ways to utilize the investment. My question to you kind of comes from a, King County wide level. My family now is, settled in Federal Way, right? And so I know that Federal Way, like many other South King County cities, has really seen an influx of Black families, and yet there are still some elements that they could probably learn from Seattle more than anything around how to prioritize community voices in the programming that they create, in the strategies and solutions that will really mitigate families having to deal with gun violence and having to be the ones to carry that trauma. And so my question to you is there anything from your office that is allowing for that kind of learning to take shape, and for these other cities who may not have been used to the diversity that they're experiencing now to kind of learn from some of the greater ways that it's being done elsewhere? Or is there something that's really at the county-wide level saying we need to prioritize these community voices?
Yeah, thank you for that. And, as I mentioned, I'm working in the gun violence arena to really make sure that all of the jurisdictions are on the same page. But you're right. There are learnings. We're constantly learning. And one of the things that we've been learning, getting better at, is how to share power, how to listen to authentic voices, how to really turn to those with lived experience to get the solutions that are needed to deal with the challenges countywide. And we want to share those learnings with cities. I mean, the city of Seattle has gotten reasonably good at that. We've been practicing in a whole bunch of different arenas, whether it's signing people up for affordable health care or gun violence or where have you, to homelessness response, to share power and to have a much more sort of horizontal or partnership model rather than this top-down, we know best model. And yeah, we are not only happy to, I think it should be part of our job to try to share that with other communities, with cities within the counties, so that we can have a single approach that is based on the best practices and our learnings from, making mistakes over time and trying to get better.
All right, I know we've kept you over time, Executive Constantine. I appreciate it. I got one last question for you here. This was July 24th of last year. I believe it was the state of the county address, and you made this statement right here.
Our county's namesake, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., said, "Only when it is dark enough can you see the stars."
Man, it's been pretty dark. It's been some good stuff going on the last year too, but it's been pretty dark. And it's been dark enough. So what stars do you see for our county, and especially Black people and people of color in King County?
Well, I do think that was following up on a sort of observation about crisis creating opportunity. And here we have this complex of crises of the COVID crisis and the economic crisis and the climate crisis. Remember the smoke rolling in and the crisis of democracy, and then people taking to the streets, somehow belatedly awakening to the reality of racism embedded in every system in this country, including in policing. And we're watching the trial of the cop who killed George Floyd right now happen in real time. And this moment seems to have been a time when there's been enough upset in the status quo that people broadly are ready for change and rapid change. We've been working away, you've been working away sort of dutifully for years, building the foundation, pushing as hard as we can to make change happen. And suddenly we've broken through onto the open field, and it's time to run. It is time to make the changes that we need in our community. And central to that is becoming a place where every person has the opportunity to be part and to thrive. And we can spend money purposefully, as I've outlined here today, to make sure there is more economic opportunity for the Black community, for the Indigenous community in particular, for those who've been historically excluded. We can spend money directly to make sure that the barriers to participation and success are removed. That I think people are more ready for this than they have ever been. And I also think if history is our guide, we need to recognize that this door will not stay open forever. So there's an urgency about it, which is why I've devoted a lot of funding from this $600 million and more into the work of transforming this community. This is our time. This is the time. It will not last forever. And we have to take advantage of this while people are really sort of untethered, while they are feeling uncertain, and they want a country that is different than the one we had before the COVID crisis began.
Yeah.
All right. King County Executive Dal Constantine, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Hear from the county executive.
Yeah.
I think that, we just got to cut through things. You know what I'm saying? 600 million is a lot of money, and it's going to a lot of deserving places, a lot of people suffering in different sectors and everything else. But for us, keep it culturally relevant, man, to our programming. There's a few different things that jumped out there. He talked about, money for jobs, but economic development, economic drivers. I think for a long time there's been so much of a handout instead of a hand up mentality.
Mm-hmm. And it sounded like, he was taking into account some of the learned lessons. And I think that that's key, because oftentimes what we've saw is that we felt like there was a real status quo. It's just like one and the same. I mean, we talk about it in homelessness all the time, how there's millions of dollars thrown at homelessness, and yet we still have such a huge crisis around homelessness. And I think that, being real specific here for our audience and us being authentically us, we had to attack it from a Black perspective. Like, what is all this money going to do for Black people, period?
Yeah. I mean, and if now is the time, let's let now be the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If now, I think that there's always been this gimme budget, you know what I'm saying? We need to get this to the Blacks. We need to do this and that. But it's the intentionality of the result. Period. Now is the time where how intentional are we going to be as a city and county to get the results? And where is it really going to be result oriented? This is what we want to see. It's these end results. And that's why I say we got to hold people's feet to the fire. I was happy to hear the response about this soundstage
yeah.
is being built, because it's traditionally, public tax dollars get used to build something and Black people get excluded. I
Yeah.
mean, we see it like everywhere. And so, it's good to hear that they've got these initiatives set up to give studios that come in a break if they hire more people of color, but then also incentives for local filmmakers to go down there.
Yeah, because I mean, what we've also saw time and time again is that the minute that we have something that seems like it's hot, then everybody wants to flood into the
Black
city
people
to
get
do
kicked
it,
out,
man.
yeah.
And then once again, it's not being utilized by those of us who grew up here, graduated from Garfield. I mean, we have to be direct and real specific about it, man, because it's not just about these opportunities. And like, we just saw it with the tech industry, man. We don't need another one of those kind of booms.
Right? I was on a call with, it was all nice people, by the way. And I was a guest on there. It was me and Detlef Shrimp, who the former Sonic. And it was a group, it was mostly investors and tech people. And it was a lot of high-fiving on the call, which you should. They were like, oh yeah, man, we just closed this VC, this this company's moving into Seattle and everything else. And I told him, I'm like, I'm not trying to pour water on your parade. This is good. You guys have worked in business and you're benefiting from it. I want to, I aspire for that as well. But I said, just remember, while you guys are riding that wave, a lot of us are still left here on the shore.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And a light bulb kind of went on in the room and people realized that there really is 2 Seattles. Maybe 3, 4, 5, but at least 2 Seattles. There really is 2 King counties. And so when we hear the big headlines of this and that, man, that's fantastic. But a lot of times we're left on the shore. Yeah. We don't get to ride that wave. We're left here for one reason or another. And it's time that we start calling that out and saying like, yo, okay, before you pat each other on the back, let's look at this thing holistically.
Right. And I think it's too about understanding the wide breadth of brilliance that's within the city. I mean, I think so much of it is that this cannot be no longer some destination city where you're coming here to do certain work, coming here to launch these tech companies, coming here to, try to bring more and more people from outside of here to build up your industry, your company, your firm, whatever it is. But ultimately, understanding that there's much brilliance right here, man. And so I'm glad you were able to point that out.
And I think before we hit this topic of gun violence disruption, also on that same call that I was on, it was people who were like, oh, well, man, I really like how Seattle is right now. It's very diverse, it's very international and everything else, which is dope. I was a migrant worker most of my career, working in different countries around the world. You know what I'm saying? I think it's great that people come here. I'm all for that. But my question I posed is, why does it got to come at the expense of poor people?
Yeah.
Why does it got to come at the expense of Black people? Why does it have to be either or? Why can't we be this great destination that whether it's tech or any other industry that people want to come to, and we still be a city that's supportive and people of color can still live here? And, marginalized, like, that's what people should want to aspire for. Yeah. Like, I'm not tripping. Like, man, you know what? Bolster economy, tech people, man, do it. You know what I'm saying? But it don't need to come at our expense. You see what I'm saying? And if we're really the brilliant city that we claim to be, then we would figure that out. But it's like so many people, the poor people in Seattle just got thrown out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so if we're really this emerald city that we claim that we want to be, we got to be able to find a solution to where Black people, people of color, artists, marginalized people aren't all just pushed out of the city to accommodate a sector.
Absolutely. And I love how you said there, it doesn't have to be an either or. We're always talking about a both and that is really the lesson learned here, is that there's a way to literally create these pathways so that it is a both and, so that it is a destination place for filmmakers all over the world to want to come here. I've said that, we had a mayoral candidate here and I'm like, well, what would you do in that regard? Because we have beautiful scenery. We have amazing outdoors. And it's one of our, we're the Emerald City for a reason, right? It's just one of our pillars that we can stand on and know that we have all of these. I mean, you got the water, you got the mountains, you got this. So for me, I agree. let's learn from those past lessons, and let's be a both and.
Right. And as far as the executive's statements around the county's efforts in disrupting gun violence, I think that I think it's that they are going with this regional approach. They're now looking at it regionally. Demographics have shifted, and people are moving around a lot more in between these different cities around the county. And looking at it in a regional approach, they have a lot of big data. We played that clip from the community town hall where Willard Jimerson was saying that I think it's 80 people. It's either 80 or 150 who are the actual shooters. It's a group of 150 people that they could identify through data of either who shot somebody, was shot at, or witnessed a shooting or something else. And they're able to extrapolate all this information, and they're able to what they talked about there with this Go First is basically, man, these guys, they go to the hospital. They're like, man, what happened? What's going on here? They're back in the community and neighborhood, and they're trying to disrupt it. But, to that point, there's a massive cost, even for people who are just like dollars and cents people who could really care less about youth gun violence in the Black community. There's an enormous cost that taxpayers pay around gun violence. And that's why I brought it up to the county executive. I'm like, man, are you putting enough resources here between the executive and the legislative branches? The county really putting the resources that are required to tackle this issue? It'd be good. We'll talk to other players in this ecosystem. But I will say that I'm glad that they're out there, that public health is out there out front, zero youth detention is out there, and they're looking at it in a regional approach. Because, man, this shit got to stop.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Omari. And this is why, again, when we're talking about how do we create new pathways, new initiatives, new measures, how do we be innovative in the ways that we're going to look at this? And I think the regional approach is key here, particularly because we have had such a wide disruption of gentrification that meant that Black families particularly were the ones spreading throughout all of these other counties. And so we have to look at it from, not just a county level, but regionally. And I love that they're doing that. I also think you're right, man, in terms of this having to stop. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the benefits of this approach and understanding the history, how it's going to actually benefit people on the ground. Because we talk about this oftentimes. How do we elevate the material conditions of Black folks so that they actually are not involving themselves in these kinds of situations, so that they can see themselves as a part of the economy and not be feeling like there is two Seattles, two King counties, two Washington states, whatever it is, because there's people here making money hand over fist in the droves. You know what I mean? And ultimately, we really do need to be able to create equitable plans that allow for that wealth to spread, because that's really where you start to see a decrease in so much of this violence, where you see people actually having, pursuing jobs that they love, utilizing their passion in a way that brings them some real monies that they can take care of their young babies, take care of their mamas if they got to. That's what we're talking about here. And I'm happy to see some of these new ways of thinking about it hit the ground.
Yeah, I think that as well, when we talk about this approach for gun violence, especially youth gun violence, there's so many intersection points. Clearly, there's the right now. Here's the person who's shooting, right now in this moment. And there's so many what they call upstream. And I think that the approach a lot of times has been very fragmented and very segmented. And we need to really look at this in totality. It's true that good jobs and good economic conditions lead to better things. But you know what? So does good mentorship. So does good community. So does people being there. Look, man, our parents, our grandparents, they worked for peanuts compared to what we would make today, but that didn't make them go out and kill nobody. Where our parents, Big Mama and them, Grandma, man, worked 30, 40 years. You know what I'm saying? Hard work. And so, we need to be able to reclaim, like, yo, man, whether you got a good paying job or a low paying job, picking up a gun ain't never an answer. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Man, whether you're employed or unemployed, this is what I'm saying is somewhere, you know what we got to do? We have to reclaim our values. Somehow, these are our core values. Look at our parents. Look at our grandparents. Set great examples for us. Great examples. went to work every day, shied away from this, shied away from that, maybe kept us in the church or everything else, sent us off, put us in, in different programs and everything. Our values are there. We've allowed them to be hidden. We've allowed our values to dissipate. No one wants to call us to our higher purpose in our values. And what I hope is in this regional approach, yes, we need on every level. This needs to stop in the streets immediately, 100%. But when we talk about upstream, because you know what, when you got good values, when you've got character and integrity and all these things, the last thing you're going to want to do is take somebody's life, whether you're making $15 an hour or $150,000 a year, because it comes from your values, man. We got to reclaim that.
I love that approach. And I think you're 100% right. One of the things that I have heard so much about and really participated in is understanding community covenants. It was something that we had unspokenly when we were growing up. It was like, when I go somewhere, I'm showing off my best self. I'm representing my family. It was something my parents used to say to us all the time. Hey, when you're at that school, just know you're representing us. Hey, when you're at that new job, know you're representing us. Hey, when you're out there at the camp, summer camp, whatever, you're representing us. And it was a real value that allowed you to understand that, look, this is not just about me. This is about me being there for my family. I'm a representation of what the holiday name means out here in these streets. And I am not going to be having people looking at me a certain way and then have that reflect badly or negatively on my family. So much of that was instilled in me as a young woman and a young girl. And I understood that moving forward. And it's something that I then want to make sure I was giving to my kids. And I think one of the things that you really mentioned here that is hitting me so hard is that we understood that there was a breakdown of those values throughout a lot of different measures. We saw it with certain drug epidemics. We saw it, how it affected our people with, gang violence, the rise of gangs, the rise of the popularity of what it meant to be in gangs or to be in certain crews that were doing things that were really not representative of your family values. We saw that. And then we also saw an influx of young single mothers who were not doing that. And now their babies are teenagers, are young adults, and we're seeing it play out. So I think you're absolutely right that there was many things that distorted us from having those sense of values, whether it was that it was church related or not. At the end of the day, you had people that were in your life that were holding you accountable to being your best self. And we need to get back to that, man. We need to be holding each other accountable in community to being our best self and rising to the occasion of understanding who we are at the center of our being. And I agree 100% here on this.
Yeah, and this is why I think that any approach, if they're really talking about let's really get at the heart of the issue here, gun violence. Like I said, there's issues today, and that's what, like, you see Willard and a lot of these guys, Sean Good, Dom, Derek, Buki. I mean, that's just like, man, right now, and they're out there, they're in the mix, but not even and there's also something to be said of like, man, you know what? How can we invest in value restoration in our community? How can we invest? There's plenty of times, man. I remember walking home from school, friends would be like, man, they're gonna go ready to go shoplift. You know what I'm saying? I'd be like, man, my mama will whip my ass if I go. And I'll go home. Next thing you know, these guys are in the police car. But those are those values that come at a young age. You see what I'm saying? They come at a young age. We need to make an investment in value restoration in our community. And in that investment, like any investment, it takes time to accrue, but we'll see that over time, that when we restore our core values in our community, we'll see that end result in our community. And other thing I would say is like, and I didn't get a chance to ask the executive this, but and we can't end the show without flipping this also on its head to say that there's literally tens of thousands of Black people in Seattle, King County area who go to work every day, aren't in the criminal justice system, ain't in jail, ain't shot nobody, ain't used no drugs, just like nationally. It's 117 historically Black colleges and universities, the year in and year out, churn out Black people who go and do amazing things, quite often. I mean, of course, this is big news here right there in 23rd and Jackson. We talk about, these negatives in our community, but we can't never forget that nationally, when you take all Black people in America, you know what I'm saying, it's a very small percentage is this percentage that we talk about on these impacts here, but it's easy for us to assume and to think that it's all Black people. And that's one thing we're not going to do, especially in the show here on Converge, and leaving our audience thinking. I want to acknowledge thousands of parents here across, Seattle, King County, state of Washington, who are engaged in their children, who be there, to go to the practices, to do the study hall, to do, that are coaches and everything else. More of us are on point than are not. You know what I'm saying? More of us make it happen than do not. There's no way we can end this broadcast with people thinking that oh, well, man, everybody Black is. Nah, man. There's so many Black people, Black parents, Black children out here thriving in the space, and want to acknowledge them. And also, one thing I would just say is it would be good in this investment. When they talk about investment, a lot of times if a kid's in trouble, you can find resources, which is good. Yeah. But man, who got resources for the kid who can't afford to pay for the PSAT?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Who got resources for the kid who just wants to do extra tutoring so they could apply to Stanford? Who got resources? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We also got to look at, like, man, there's a lot of people who are doing the right thing, but their resources are short.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit something for me that really strikes up my childhood. I remember being at Garfield, and I remember being in great grades, getting great grades and all this other stuff. And I was a TA at one point. And so I went into one of the classrooms where it was like these guys were, struggling a bit, and it was like their math, they had to redo it again, right? But they were doing their best. And I remember the teacher saying to them, hey, if everybody does this test well, if everybody passes this, you guys are going to get to go to Wild Waves, right? And I was thinking, wow, that's phenomenal. But what about those of us who are already doing well? So I agree, Omari, that it needs to be full spectrum, right? That we need to be able to uplift those who have a great model of raising their kids, of doing the right thing, of having the right programming in all of the sectors that are necessary. And also that we make sure that we have a real spotlight, as what Willard was talking about in terms of that data, what it showcased, whether it's 80 or 150, and it's kind of the same group of folks. How do we do things that are really specific to them to really inject those values, and how do we uplift those that already have them? I agree. It's a both and, once again.
Right. And before we get out of here, a real easy win and a big shout out, man, to examples in our community. And you talk about like the Rotary coaches, you talk about CD Panthers, you talk about Rainer Eagles. Some of these coaches been there, man, decades. My mom in the comments mentioned Terrell Elmore, CD Panthers, over 20 years of dealing with young people. So like I said, we don't want to end this show here today sitting here thinking that, man, we sitting here hapless and helpless. Oh my goodness.
No, and I gotta say too, Omari and I are both examples of that, right? The ways that we raised our kids. Your babies have gone off to college, one already graduated, one working hard. I mean, that's what it's about. And so I agree, because we kept those values, man, and we kept instilling them in the next generation. That was important.
And that means those values are here. So I would really say that what the aim is to identify a segment, because it's not all, clearly, a segment in our community where our values are being most eroded, and find a way to invest in the restoration of those values. And we'll see over time then that everybody rises back up.
There we go. Together we rise.
Together we rise. All right. Anything before we get out of here?
I just, my whole message, and I'm just going to keep on saying this, is that even as we're talking about it today, when we see ourselves as a part of the solution, when we are able to share what those values are, if we see somebody that is struggling, that's being a part of the solution. When we take on mentoring the next young person because maybe they don't have that in their family structure, that's okay. But those of us who do have it, let's be a part of the solution for others.
All right, good stuff. I don't know. Do we have coronavirus tonight? We'll check back in on that. If so, 6:15 tonight, coronavirus update. Just as usual, want to thank everybody. Want to thank you for tuning in, for your support. We definitely wouldn't be on air without you. I guarantee you that. And so, continuous thanks to you. We're back tomorrow. Before we get out of here, as usual, want to remind you, go forward in your purpose and go forward in your humanity. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun.